This is Rabbi Son, hot takes on news, pop culture, and religion, hosted by Rabbi Patrick, that's me, and my son Javon, that's this guy. Spiritual, irreverent, always fearless, produced by Darshan Yeshiva. So, I do just, going back to this idea of like a lack of creativity, you and I were talking about something the other day that it kind of seems like a weird segue, but a lack of creativity in how people speak about things. Okay, so you pointed something out about trigger words. So what got you thinking about trigger words?
I don't know. I was on social media.
As one does.
Yeah. And like people misuse words, or they use words that know they're gonna like elicit a response.
Okay.
So that like people like,
yeah, words that we probably can't say on this podcast because it'll,
yeah, but
algos and what have you.
Yeah, but those phrases that people use like to shut down conversation, or to be like,
right, name calling.
Yeah, if you're making a good point and then they can't rebuttal that, then you like, oh, well, you're this then.
Right. Like, obviously, you're a blank, 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 exactly. Because only a person like that would say that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right. Well, lack of creativity. That person who you're communicating with can only see people as these, like, distinct markets. You are a Trump voter who owns a gun, who goes to church and lives in Nebraska. You are a white liberal who lives in Seattle, works in tech, and, is afraid of the word gun, or like whatever, like these. Yeah. I mean, I worked in marketing for a short time, and I can tell you, like, even when I took marketing classes, I was in college, I was very good at it. I hated it conceptually. I liked the idea of selling products that are meaningful to people, or giving service to people that's meaningful. I ask God and all think that marketing might be one of the most corrupt professions that you can go into, because it's all about taking a human being who is dynamic and has history and has like hopes for the future and all of these things, and just being like, well, they're 10% conservative and 30% white and 20%, a fan of, country music, and 8% and this and that. Okay, well, now we can sell them Chapel Rowan. I mean, it's a very materialist view of like, there's nothing transcendent about a person. There's nothing creative about a person. They just kind of are dopamine, serotonin, and a credit card. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah.
But yeah. So have you found in your conversations online that people have accused you of being something that you're not, or?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. No one goes that far with you?
No.
You don't let them?
No, because I was like, oh, like, because it doesn't elicit like, oh, I'm not. Like, that doesn't elicit that from me. I'm just like, okay, I'll be that, sure. Like, what's
so
like,
you're not even gonna fight it if someone says some like, oh, well, you're a blah blah blah.
Yeah,
would you even like, respond to it?
I'm a blah blah blah. I'm like, you're right.
You just
still the point still stands.
The point still stands.
You can say whatever, but like, facts stand. Facts stand.
Facts stand on their own. Yeah, regardless of that. Yeah.
So you cannot like something, like, but at the end of the day, like, if it's a factual statement, then that's what it is. If someone has an opinion, then that's what it is. Like, you cannot like something, and well, just keep on not liking it, because no one's gonna change, like, for you.
Right. And also, what is your responsibility to convince some random person on the internet that you are not whatever they are calling you?
Exactly.
Right. Like, yeah.
It makes it seem like you are, because like you're going like die hard about I'm not. Like, it's like it's that like weird like thing of, if I call you that and then like you go like rabid, and then it's like, oh, someone who really wasn't that,
right.
Of like, and then that goes to, people just need to learn how to use social media. And like, a lot of people don't know how to use social media. And that's a crazy thing, because like, at some point, like, you know, kids, okay, I get that. Kids, but like you're an adult. Like if you are like 45 and like, you know, a parent and you're like melting on social media.
Yeah.
Because like what someone said in the comment section.
Yeah.
Like
someone who you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I could understand being very legitimately upset if like a friend or someone like that says something nasty about you on social media. That's a nightmare. I've never experienced that, but I've seen it before. Like not of like a friend or a family member. Like randos, yes. But
yeah, because it just, I don't know, people need to learn how to navigate social media. Like you don't have to comment on everything. Like I get, like you can be like, okay, this is my opinion. Put it there, mute it, go on about your day.
Well, so this makes me wonder if, because Darshan Yeshiva, you know, is a school dedicated to independent Jewish spirituality and is focused on Judaism for beginners, maybe you and I need to look at some of these life skills that we think people should have, and we should teach people like how not to get frustrated so easily, how to navigate social media, and you could do the sort of how component, and I could do the religion component. So if you're interested in a course on how to adult by these two people, you know, put it in the comments there.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't know how to teach someone how not get frustrated. Like the people, I don't know, people,
because it's intrinsic to your personality.
Yeah. Like sometimes, like I get people have like these strong opinions and they want to put their opinion out there and like they want to combat someone else's opinion to like try to change their minds.
Yeah.
But you don't change someone's minds by name calling because that like voids the conversation. That stops productivity.
Right.
Like you're gonna be like, oh well, you're this, and then that automatically turns that person off and says, okay, well, you don't really care about my opinion, and you just think I'm that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have an opinion, and then like you know, you can work it out. You can find the middle.
Right.
Like,
constructive. Yeah.
No one is just like there's like no one who's like on these like, well, I won't say no one, but like
there's trolls
who's just like on like these far, like super far cliffs that like you can't climb because there's like no point.
Right. There's a couple of lines from the Talmud that I thought were appropriate to this, and for this one, I would say this is Pirke Avot. So this is the ethics of the fathers or the ancestors or whatever, however you want to gender that one. But it's Pirke Avot 4:1, and this is on who is a wise person. So Ben Zoma says, "Who is wise? He who learns from every man, as it is said, from all who taught me have I gained understanding." So basically, Ben Zoma is quoting the Psalms as his argument for who is a wise person. It's a person who learns from everyone. And it literally says, Mikol Adam, meaning like every person, every human being is who you can learn from. So there is no like person that I'm not allowed to like listen to. I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to have them, you know, take up like mental like real estate, right, in my mind for free to live rent free in my head. But I do, like, even with someone who's really frustrating, I can sit back and go like, how do I learn from this person? Yeah.
But speaking on that, you know, about the whole, you know, learning from people, that goes to asking questions.
Right.
And, you know, people, like, I'm a question asker.
You are, in a good way, very good way.
I mean, I take it as an insult. You know, just the learning process as it's life.
That's so, right, absolutely.
You know, I'm going to ask my questions, but this goes on to, like, the conversation with social media. So, like, when I'm on social media, it's, and, like, there's some, like, you know, political stuff going on.
Okay.
You know, I most of the time, like, I see it, and I'll be like, okay, like, that's good. But then, like, it's sometimes I'd be, like, genuinely curious of, like, how people came to, like, a conclusion.
Okay.
So it's, like, you know, I genuinely asked the question of, well, how does that relate to this?
Sure.
Because, like, it was a conversation about I don't know if it's going to be relevant, you know, as when this podcast is posted, but the Trump and, you know, Trump's tariff policy towards Mexico. And then someone in the comments like somehow tethered, Trump's policy on tariffs to immigration, which he had never said those two things were together. So I was like, well, how does increasing tariffs like have an effect on immigration? And I was like, asking that person that. So then, I'm just, how does that relate? So then I'm waiting for a response. So then another person responds and is like, well, if Mexico, if there's higher tariffs on Mexico, then something or another relates to immigration.
Okay.
And I was just like, well, that's not really how that works.
Okay.
Like, because Trump was not leveraging tariffs in order for Mexico to control their side of the border.
Right.
This is like purely
it's unrelated issues.
Yeah,
it's you're talking about two countries and how they are negotiating with each other, but it's two different things.
Yeah, not on immigration, purely financial.
Right.
And that person made that assumption that in their mind, because no one had said that. No one had said, Trump never said that he was going to tie the tariffs increase to immigration. So I was like, okay. So I was like, trying to have a dialogue, but I'm still like, what does that do? Because there was no explanation on how do those two things still come together.
Right.
There was didn't say, oh, well, Trump.
They didn't say how they came up with that opinion.
Like this assumption.
Okay.
Like that,
because it's just a subject matter. It's like a thought bubble of like Mexico, tariffs, immigration. They're just connecting dots. Yeah.
So then it was somebody else commented like to me, like, did you really ask that question?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then the other person said, the other person commented on their post like, sometimes not obvious to people.
Okay.
Clearly they're trying to be like smart Alex.
Right.
But like, they thought that they were getting a one-up by trying to insult my intelligence by asking a basic question. Okay. So it was like, me, I was not going to go on, the defensive and being like, well, you're stupid for this, and this reason, which I could have done. Because they still made no sense because there was no tether to those two topics. It was completely fabricated in their imagination. But I didn't go on the defensive. I'm like, look, asking questions, trying to get in your head and trying to figure out what's going on is like having a conversation. This is a dialogue. Right. No one's attacking you. I'm just asking a simple question. If you feel like someone posing a simple question to you is an attack against you, do you have problems? Right. Serious problems. Right. And if you can't properly articulate why your opinion is what it is, then you really don't have an opinion.
And it's okay to have a feeling, right? So you might say, I'm gonna come up with something that's really generic. So you might say I don't know, whatever, cats are better than dogs. Okay. Is that an opinion or a feeling? Right? So an opinion might be based on some series of facts, and you're asking, well, give me the facts. If you said to someone, I just feel that way. Okay, well, then it's a feeling. People are allowed to have their feelings. Doesn't mean that has to run your life. Doesn't mean that has to run anybody else's life.
Doesn't mean you even have to respond to someone saying cats are better than dogs.
Right, exactly.
It
can just be...
dogs are better than cats. You can let that statement stand, and you don't have to interact with it. Right. Sometimes people can make a statement and you don't have to interact with it. Right. Because
that's a good one. That some people can just make a statement, but you don't have to interact with it. There's no rule that says you have to do that. Or the statement could be just... That's very true.
Just demonstrably false. You just be like, okay. And send it on its way.
Right.
If you know it's, sometimes you don't have to let everyone know.
Right.
Sometimes people need to look into things on their own. Right. And not just be like, oh, well, this person said it, so that's fine. Right. But to pivot back to what we're really talking about, people being afraid to ask questions. Right. Or people who think that sometimes simple questions should be common knowledge. Okay. Sometimes you know how to do stuff that someone else doesn't know how to do. Sure. And it's maybe a simple question to you, but to them that person genuinely doesn't know. Yeah. You do not need to name call. All you need to simply do is hey, well, here's how to, do that thing. Right. And then you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, people are so afraid to ask questions because then they're like gonna look stupid.
Right.
But like, no, you're gonna look more stupid if you just like, you know, go out and pretend you know the answer.
Sure.
Like, you like people, you know, to piggyback off that quote, you know, the wise aren't the wise because they didn't ask questions.
Correct.
They asked questions, you know, they went to seek out answers.
Correct.
The fools pretend they know the answer.
Correct.
And they continue to be a fool.
Correct.
So don't make anyone feel like, you know, you're less than for asking a question that may seem, you know, simple, but, you know, simple that, you know, people think is like common knowledge, but clearly it's not common knowledge to you. That's why you ask the question.
Yep, absolutely. And also the idea, if it is like a debate, let's say, this idea in Pirke Avot, a chapter later in 517, the idea of arguing for the sake of heaven, which I think gets taken out of context a lot, and that could be a whole podcast episode. But basically, there's the idea that arguments that are not for the sake of heaven will not stand. Arguments that are for the sake of heaven will. And a very short, and like the internet will come after me because everyone's going to want to give their little explanations of how I'm wrong here. But like, the idea is that important issues, like things that are really about like the nature of the universe and of life and of what does it mean to live a good life, those are arguments that are worth having. An argument doesn't mean fighting. It just means debating, discussing, disagreeing, coming to different conclusions. But the pointless stuff, like the things that don't actually legitimately lift us up as people, like those are the ones that are just going to kind of fall by the wayside. In a perfect world, I would say that maybe that's not true anymore. Maybe like the BS arguments are more exciting to everybody and, you know, whatever than the really important existential ones. But, you know, whatever.
Yeah, no, something like when it comes to things going on in the society right now, like what are we focused on? We're focused on like a whole bunch of non-issues and like letting the big things fester.
Right.
So then like when it's time to like address the big thing, it's like, well, you were talking about something that like, literally affects probably no one.
Right.
And instead of talking about like what's going on, it's a distraction tactic.
Yes.
To get, you know, people to pivot somewhere else.
Right.
While the main course, like, you know, the main issue,
right,
is like, you know,
right, yeah. And what happens when, you know, with social media in particular, like what happens when the system that we use to even have these conversations can manipulate the direction that things go in, right? So you and I can have this conversation, and the only things that are controlling it are, you know, the dinner's going to be ready soon, right? Like that's it. That's the only thing that's really, you know, unless there's other distractions. It's not like as we're talking, the floor is moving to try to like prop you up or push me down, or I say something to you and you can't hear it for 20 more minutes because like, you know, the system is trying to arrange a particular way of engaging. It is a live engagement. None of this is edited. Like it's just boom. And if all of our conversations are now on our cell phones, then like, what do you even do with that?
Yeah, but I do think like, you know, people, it's especially with social media, like when the likes start, like when they have like a saucy opinion, and they're like, you know, having this back and forth, they're like, oh, I got more likes than this person, so like, you know, that must mean I'm right. Like,
oh God, you know, right,
like,
right,
know, like no, it's like you're like you can think you're right, which you know you're entitled to think you're right, you know, but it's like no, those people just agree with your opinion. Those are people who would agree with you anyway.
Right.
Like it's not like
you
know.
Right. It just means you have a better platform in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't actually mean anything about how valid your argument is.
Exactly. Like sometimes the elevation of, and that's why I feel like a Gen Z, quote unquote Gen Z, political influencers or like whatever.
Right.
Like I just don't think the certain ones that I've seen haven't really had a hard life.
Okay, interesting.
You know what I'm saying? Like they haven't lived life. Like if you were like, you know, if you grew up, you know, in your little middle class, you know, little lifestyle and like, you know, you know, when you were 16, you had a car, and like,
right,
you just had like this amazing life. Like you can talk about, you know, these things from like, statistics and like fact based, but you don't actually live that way. And like sometimes I feel like people who come from like a more like privileged background like think that like, you know, just poor people like me, like all this help, but like, you know, sometimes people make do. Right. People make do and like, you know, live life. And they do. Like, you know, of course you would like want to help people, but like telling people who came from that, like, you know, trying to be like, you know, on this high horse with your nose like up in the air, like acting all uppity and thinking like you know best. Right. Like, but you haven't lived that. Right. You don't know that. You don't know anyone who's lived that. Right. You like live your life in this space. And I still don't like those type of people advocating for like an entire generation. Right. Like, because that's not an entire generation. That's not how this whole generation lived. That's not how I lived.
Right. Like, there's no such thing as how a generation lives, because you're not taking into account, you know, what are people's socioeconomic backgrounds, what are their nationalities, their religions, the cultures, the families they come from.
Yeah, and like the people that tend to get elevated to these places tend to not be not upper middle class. Right.
Yeah. And so you have an echo chamber at that
exactly.
Point.
And very white.
Right.
Like, you know, besides from like, you know, the one Hispanic girl I've seen, like, you know, there's not really any representation of like different Gen Z opinions. Like people like to push out other opinions and then like make these people like the poster children for like an entire generation. Right. But it's like, no, you can never be a poster child for me because like our lives are like
very different. You have different experiences.
Right. And like which you know.
Yeah, and I will admit I have been very unfair with some of this, where I've had conversations and I've talked about, you know, sort of elder millennial Gen X types like me and what our childhoods were like versus others. And I'm like, yeah, but I had one kind of childhood. Right. And so the things that were good about it, the things that I wish could have been different, like that's just a reflection of my life. That's not a reflection of an entire generation of people. Like we had these terms like latchkey kids and like all this other stuff. It's like, yeah, that didn't apply to certain people. Yeah. So I get it. And then arguing generationally, it's even worse because it's like back in my day, well, right, that was your day.
Yeah, your day passed.
Well, your day. Well, like yeah,
it's passed.
Yeah, like, but yeah, that's true. I mean, it has passed, but like also what happened in my day happened in my particular kind of neighborhood, which had particular kinds of people, particular kinds of families, things like that. And that may have been wildly different than someone who's the exact same age as me, who has completely different opinions than I do, because even though we're the same generation, we're like living completely different worlds apart.
Yeah, and then it's like, you know, I get like the older people, like, you know, back in my day, but it's like,
oh no,
you know, the times change, things progress.
They do, yeah.
And like, I get that older people feel as though like they're getting left behind.
Oh, yeah.
It is not like you're getting left behind. It's like, you know, that things are changing and you have to like, you know, grow.
Every generation will feel that way. You will feel that way. I promise you.
Who said I wouldn't?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
like,
everyone. It happens to everybody.
This, you know, learning curves.
Yeah.
In this, like, you know, big mess that is life.
Yeah.
That, you know, you have to be like, okay, I, you know, really don't understand it right now, but like, I'm gonna work to understand it because I still have to like. We're all in the same world.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just like, you know, you don't have to like continue to push them down or like, you know, look like. Back in my day, we did this, that, and the third. We didn't talk about, you know, this mental health, you know, softy. And it's like, well, you may not talk about mental health, but like you were probably hitting the bottle. And like, you know, is that a more healthy way? Like,
right. Yeah, there were generations that did that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like
but not all of them, right? That's an important thing to remember, right? Not all people in a generation did one thing.
Not people in this generation. Not all people in this generation go to therapy.
Right. Exactly.
You know, or you know, go to therapy more than, you know, required.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, moral of the story is that, you know, we've lost a lot of creativity in this world, and human beings are more than just the generation that they belong to, their religion, their socioeconomic, whatever People are very dynamic, and we need to learn from everybody, and we need to create with everybody.
Exactly. So don't be fools. Ask questions.
There you go. I like it.
And don't be ashamed. Because, those people, there's someone in that room that doesn't know the answer to the question you're asking. Yeah. And they're never going to ask
That's right. That's right. I always feel bad during Torah study for the quiet people, because I'm like, oh, I wish you would ask questions. Exactly. Because I bet you got some good ones in there and you're afraid to.
Exactly. Like, yeah, who cares? Like, you can't live for everybody else. If you were living for everybody else, like, you might as well just go ahead and pick your casket out now. Because you're never going to satisfy everybody.
Right.
So like, this is your one go around.
Be creative, take chances, live life.
Exactly. For you.
Yeah. Not ask questions.
People. Yeah, one go around. Make it. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. All right, this is Rabbi and Son. Thanks so much. Thank you to our sponsors at Darshan Yeshiva for making this content possible. Darshan Yeshiva provides beginner-level online Jewish learning, including the very popular Conversion to Judaism program, with sponsoring rabbis and students all over the world. Start your Jewish journey any place, anywhere, and anytime with our conservative, reform, reconstructionist, Jewish renewal, humanistic, and post-denominational rabbi mentors. Become the Jew you always wanted to be with Darshan Yeshiva.